You check the balance at 11 p.m., not because a payment is late, not because the market did something today that rattled you. You check it because not checking it produces a specific low-grade discomfort, and checking it makes that discomfort go quiet for a while. So you check. It's fine. It's almost always fine. You close the app, and 20 minutes later, you're thinking about it again. You're not saving for security anymore. You're saving because you don't trust yourself to stop. That's not a financial problem. And the tracking, the spreadsheets, the projections, the accounts checked before sleep, those aren't discipline. That's a loop. And you've been inside it long enough that the loop has started to feel like your personality. Here's what's actually true about you. And I'm not saying this to soften what comes next. You are genuinely good with money, not as a performance, actually good. You've avoided the major mistakes, the consumer debt spiral, the lifestyle inflation trap, the impulsive decisions that take other people years to recover from. You think ahead, you understand the math, you've probably built something real. That didn't happen by accident. It came from a decision you made at some point, maybe after watching someone else struggle, maybe after your own close call, maybe from something absorbed early that you've never fully named. The decision was, I will not be caught off guard. I will know my numbers. I will be the careful one. And that decision served you. But here's where it gets complicated. At some point, the decision stopped being a choice you were making and became a system that was running automatically. And systems that run automatically don't stay in their original shape. They expand. They reach into places you didn't consciously send them. What began as financial awareness, a tool, a practice, quietly became a requirement, not because you decided it should be, because the behavior had been reinforced enough times that your brain stopped asking whether it was necessary. And that's where it stops being about money.
The trap isn't that you're careless. The trap is that you became so careful that the carefulness itself became the problem. Early on, tracking your finances produced real outcomes. You caught an overspend, you found a savings opportunity, you built a buffer that actually absorbed a crisis. The behavior was a tool you were using. But somewhere, and there's no alarm when it happens, the tracking stopped producing new information and started producing a feeling, a brief, reliable sense of order and control in a world that otherwise doesn't offer much of either. Once that shift happened, you were no longer managing your money. You were managing your anxiety about money. And those look so similar, from the outside, from the inside, that almost nobody notices the difference until years have passed. Try something. Imagine not checking your accounts for 2 weeks. Everything automated, transfers running, nothing broken. You just don't look. What does that produce in you right now? For some people, nothing much, mild restlessness. For others, and you know if you're one of them, that image produced something sharper, a quiet resistance, a sense that things need watching, that you are in some specific way the thing standing between your financial situation and its unraveling. That feeling is what this is actually about. Not the spreadsheet, not the balance, that feeling. And it has been running the show for longer than you think. The loop has 3 parts. Once you see all 3, you'll start noticing it running in real time. It starts with a trigger, not always dramatic, a recession headline, a conversation where someone mentioned a layoff, sometimes just a quiet Sunday with nothing urgent, which somehow feels less safe than a busy week. The trigger doesn't need to be rational. It just needs to activate the underlying question, am I actually okay? That question produces a feeling. Not panic, nothing as vivid as panic, more like a slight tightening, a sense that the ground is marginally less solid than it should be. And so you act. You open the account, rerun the projection, research a strategy you've already researched, spend 90 minutes on something you've essentially already decided. You feel purposeful, in control. And then, this is the part that makes the loop stick, the feeling eases, the tightening loosens. for a few hours, maybe a day. What your brain records from this sequence is not everything is fine. What your brain records is the behavior made the discomfort stop. Do it again. Every time the cycle completes, that association strengthens. The threshold for what counts as a trigger lowers, and the behavior scales to match. More frequent checking, more detailed tracking, a buffer that keeps expanding past any rational stopping point. The finish line keeps moving, and that's not how security is supposed to work. You built a very efficient system for managing anxiety about money. You just never built a system for resolving it. Those two things over 20 years produce very different lives. This is what smart money sabotage exists to surface, not the visible mistakes, not the impulsive ones, but the ones woven into your most disciplined habits, wearing the face of responsibility, running quietly for years without anyone naming them for what they are.
Here's what this looks like. Not in abstract, in the specific, ordinary moments where it lives. You have a significant sum sitting in cash. You know broadly where it should go. You've done more research than the decision requires, genuinely more. You know this, and still not there. Every time you approach the actual moment of committing, a new variable surfaces, a timing question, a rate environment shift, something from last week's article. What you call thoroughness is something else. The decision, once made, is irreversible. Irreversibility feels like loss of control, so you stay in research mode, where everything is still open, still optimizable, and you experience the research as action, while functionally doing nothing at all. You could afford to be wrong and recover. The wrong decision here wouldn't actually hurt you, but that's not what you're avoiding. You're avoiding the moment where the outcome is no longer fully in your hands, and that feeling matters more than the money does. Not the frivolous purchase, the considered one. A trip you've wanted to take for 3 years, a renovation you've been pricing for 2, something that would genuinely improve your life, that you clearly have the money for, and that keeps getting quietly postponed. The reason is always financially textured. Not the right time. Rather wait until things settle. Better to be conservative this year. You don't delay it once, you delay it for years and call that responsibility. There is no real financial logic in the delay. What there is, spending feels like releasing control. Watching the balance drop, even temporarily, even when you know it's fine, triggers the loop. Affording something and feeling safe spending it are two completely different things, and somewhere along the way, you stopped questioning the difference.
You had a number, specific, calculated, worked toward. Then you recalculated, adjusted for inflation, changed the withdrawal rate, added a healthcare buffer. The number moved upward. The feeling you expected when you hit the old number, it didn't arrive. The solid ground wasn't there, because the security was never in the number. The number was just the most recent address of a feeling that keeps moving just past wherever you are. And you'll hit the new number, and the feeling will move again. And some part of you already knows this. Your partner has stopped bringing up money with you. Not because they don't care, because the conversation has a consistent shape. You have more detail, more certainty. It ends with your framework intact. Over time, they've stopped initiating. What's happened is that the financial domain, because it's where you feel most in control, has become yours in a way that was never discussed. They've accommodated it. Nobody has named it, but both of you feel the asymmetry, and the accommodation that looks like harmony is doing something quieter underneath. 4 hours reviewing your insurance coverage. Nothing had changed. You followed a thread, surfaced 4 hours later, conclusion, it's fine. You called it productive. If you're honest, those 4 hours felt better than the dinner with friends the night before. The optimization gave you something the dinner didn't, a sensation of being in control. And that sensation has become something you seek, not consciously, because the loop trained you to treat it as relief. And relief, once you've been anxious long enough, starts to feel like the point.
Here's what this costs. Not in the language of motivation, in the language of slow arithmetic and quiet time. The first cost is financial, and it appears nowhere as a line item. It's the cost of money managed from anxiety rather than strategy. Funds sitting in positions that feel safe rather than positions that are rational. Decisions delayed for months, sometimes years, because making them meant tolerating the feeling of no longer controlling the outcome. The gap between where the money was and where a less anxious version of you would have placed it. Over a decade, that number is not trivial. But it's a cost of inaction. No statement, no alert. It compounds in reverse, silently. The second cost is the progressive narrowing of your actual life, the trips deferred, the experiences postponed, the choices not made because making them meant releasing some control over how they'd turn out, not into a crisis, into a version of your life that is financially solid and quietly smaller than it was supposed to be. Secure and smaller, both at once. The third cost tends to arrive later and land hardest, somewhere in the mid-50s. The number is there, the buffer is there, the plan worked, and the relationship to money never changed. The checking is still happening. The anxiety didn't resolve when the account hit the target. The loop is still running, just with larger numbers inside it. There's a particular shape to the regret that comes with that recognition. Not, I wish I'd done something differently, more diffuse, a slow awareness that the discipline was real, the sacrifice was real, the delayed gratification was real, and the thing all of that was supposed to produce never arrived, not through failure, through an excess of the very behavior that was supposed to prevent it. People in that position often describe feeling like the arithmetic cheated them. The security is objectively there, and yet, something that was supposed to ease, some vigilance, some tightness, some quiet hum of not quite enough, never did. The finish line was never actually about the money. It was about a feeling the money was supposed to unlock, and the money, by itself, does not have that key.
A few statements, not questions, statements. Notice which ones produce recognition and which ones produce resistance. Resistance is sometimes the more honest signal. You check your financial accounts more often than you check how you actually feel. You know intellectually that your situation is reasonably solid. That knowledge does not reliably produce the feeling of security. The feeling requires something else, some confirmation that the knowledge alone cannot provide. You don't feel safe spending money on things you clearly want, even when nothing in your actual situation suggests you shouldn't. And you have stopped questioning this. It just feels like how you are. When you try to imagine genuinely relaxing your financial vigilance, not abandoning it, just loosening it for a month, the first emotion that appears is not relief. It's, but what if something happens? You've hit a milestone that was supposed to feel significant. It felt significant for about 3 days. Then the baseline reset, and the monitoring continued exactly as before. The people closest to you have gently suggested you don't need to worry about money as much as you do. You received that with a smile, and quietly filed it as evidence they don't fully understand the situation. You don't have to do anything with that. These aren't diagnostic criteria. They're signals. The ones that landed, hold those. Not to judge them, just to see them clearly as something separate from you, rather than just as how things are.
Here's the reframe. And it's not a solution, because this video is not about solutions. It's about seeing the pattern clearly enough that it can't operate quite as invisibly as it has been. The checking, the tracking, the modeling, none of those things are wrong. The question isn't whether to do them. The question is what you feel in the 60 seconds before you do them, and what you feel in the 60 seconds when you decide not to. Because that gap, the feeling in the absence of the behavior, is the thing worth knowing about. The behavior is just the door you've been walking through to avoid sitting with that feeling, and it's an effective door. The problem is that walking through a door is not the same as understanding what's on the other side of it. What you've built over many years of genuinely responsible behavior is a highly efficient system for managing a specific anxiety. The system works. The problem is that managing an emotion and resolving it are two different things. Management keeps it at a functional level, just low enough that it doesn't interfere. It does not change the underlying relationship. And an emotion that is managed rather than examined tends to remain exactly as strong as it was the day you first built a system around it. You built the system. You became the system. Those aren't the same thing either. Nothing in your situation is broken, and still it doesn't feel safe. The next time you open that spreadsheet, and you will open it, that's not the point. Just notice what you were trying to control in the 30 seconds before you did. Not the account, not the number in the account. What specifically were you trying to make quiet? That question doesn't live in any financial model. It doesn't have a cell in the spreadsheet, but it's been driving this for a long time. You're not checking the numbers. You're checking whether you're safe, and those are not the same thing.